May I please, may I please request all the attendees to please take a seat so that we can begin today's orders. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore welcomes you all to the Modular Open Source Identity Platform Day. We are assembled here to mark our journey and mark our milestone where we have achieved the development and release of MOSIP 1.0. We are lucky to have today with us Professor Dame Wendy Hall and Ms. Edith Orsilia of Philippines. Today we will present to you a brief introduction on the project. We will present our view of the road ahead. We will take some questions and we will felicitate some of the exceptional contributions to the development of the platform. Without much ado, may I welcome Professor S. Sadagopan to address the audience and welcome them.
Good evening. Very special day today, and let me welcome you all for this very special day on my behalf and also on behalf of IIIT-Bangalore. We also have two amazing speakers. I'm sure you all will enjoy the evening, both from the presentations as well as the speakers. And we also seem to have an amazing place. So this is very unique in Bangalore. And I think it is kind of both. The old fellows feel that it is part of the old Galaxy Theatre. And of course, the Youngistan feels that it is a new generation. And with all the gizmos around, thanks to Samsung. Okay? And why is it? It is a special day today. See, one of my former students who happens to teach in Netherlands has put a very nice characterization. Let me quote. Watch something big like 747 Jumbo, think America. And watch those precise watches and think Switzerland. And watch a high-end car like Rolls-Royce and think of United Kingdom. Smell perfume and think America. Use software, think India, unquote. Okay? So that is what last 30 years, very quietly this country has done. We have become kind of a global player. Yet, we have our friend Prakash from Bombay all the way who has flown in. And many of them have a big complaint against us, particularly we in the academia, because all over the world, the open source movement used to be housed in an academic environment, like Berkeley for Unix, etc. So we have not really contributed much to the open source, and MOSIP, as the very name suggests, Modular Open Source Identity Platform, is perhaps the first major contribution from India in the open source arena. Second, India has been able to produce many world-class products. Perhaps today, particularly in the last couple of weeks and couple of months, perhaps the best-known products are the products out of our IITs. It is kind of humbling to see the CEO of Microsoft, the CEO of Google, and the CEO designate of IBM all happen to be products of these institutes. Okay, so that's a nice thing. But what we have probably we have not done is to make world-class and world-scale products. Okay? We not only need world-class, but we also need world-scale. Perhaps one product which is coming close to that happens to be Aadhaar, cooked between 2009 to 2015. And what MOSIP represents is the best of the ideas of Aadhaar, but moving much beyond. One of the key things that software industry has changed, software production has changed, the environment has changed. As Satya Nadella would put it, it is mobile first, cloud first, AI first. So obviously, MOSIP represents a much better architecture of what it was, and MOSIP represents truly a world-class and a world scale coming out of India. Third, my marketing friends tell me that there are two ways of getting leadership. You produce millions and millions of soap cakes, and obviously you have a huge market share. That market share gives you your mind share. That is one way. The other way is get the mind share. The mind share will create the market share. What we expect MOSIP is that we will create the mind share, make it the truly world-class, world-scale product, yet open source, yet modular. It gives all the flexibility of adapting to your need, at the same time giving you the best in class. And because it is modular, it also allows you to adapt to new things as they come around. So in that sense, we expect many countries to adopt MOSIP as their base platform on which to build. We are particularly happy that Morocco and Philippines have agreed to kind of partner with us. We are especially grateful to our friends from Philippines. They are here. You are actually going to listen to them. And ladies and gentlemen, a very special day for us. We particularly at IIIT are very excited about it. And we have some special guests. Have a great evening, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor. It is my pleasure and an honor to invite Professor Dame Wendy Hall to give a keynote address. Ma'am, if I can introduce your bio to the audience before you join, it will be very helpful. Dame Wendy Hall is a Regius Professor of Computer Science, Pro Vice Chancellor, and is an Executive Director of Web Sciences Institute at the University of Southampton. She became a Dame Commander of British Empire in 2009 and is a Fellow of Royal Society and Royal Academy of Engineering. Dame Wendy was co-chair of UK government's AI review, which was published in October 2017, and she is the first skills champion for AI in the UK. Ma'am, over to you.
Is that okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me at the back? Good. It's a pleasure to be here with old friends, new friends, wonderful venue, built by some ancestors of mine. I haven't got long, so let's get straight to it. I want to tell you a story. The web and the internet were founded on open standards. They were founded on the concept of open source. They work because of the network effect. The more people that use them, the more people use the technology. And Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, who invented the protocols for the internet, and Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the protocols for the web, they put them out there and said, here, these are open, free, you use them. Can you get them to stop talking up there? They're free for the world to use. And that is why where internet and the web have become so successful worldwide. Okay? So the internet, and Tim founded the web on the open internet, decentralized, with the thesis that anyone could use it. And that was why it worked. What we didn't foresee was that we thought at the very beginning that everyone would use it for the good. Right? Then that's a really important message. It isn't true. History tells us that human society is writ large on the World Wide Web. The good, the bad, and the ugly are all there. Because once you give access to people information, other people are going to try and tell you lies, they're going to try and steal from you, they're going to try and make money out of you. Not that there's anything wrong in companies making money, but it's how they do it sometimes. We've moved into a world now where we have very big companies, mostly on the west coast of America. We have equivalent companies in China, but of course most of us don't speak Chinese and aren't going to use those because of the language issue apart from anything else. But we all are dominated by the big companies on the west coast. They are bigger than nation states. They have more data than most governments. And that data is about us. But we use them willingly, no one forces us to, because we get a return on our investment. We get what we want. We get information. We get boyfriends, girlfriends. We get to book travel. We get to do everything we want. We get to talk to other people in social networks. We get to tweet to the world about what's happening. And all the other things that have happened, the Uber and TripAdvisor and everything else that's happened because of this technology. Now, we've been writing about what we call the 4 internets. And you may say, why am I talking about 4 internets? Well, the first one was the open and free, which still exists, and the technical standards are still the same. So when you're designing your open source platform, you don't worry about the standards by which you are talking to the internet. That's still the same. If that broke, just imagine the job of the developers if you had different technical standards for the internet in every different countries. Imagine what that would do to your world. It would make it a nightmare. It wouldn't work. But there are nations in this world that would like to see different technical standards. So that's one issue. But given that those are the same, we still have an open and free internet. So if you publish something in India on the internet, anyone in the world can potentially read it, unless their government stop them doing so. The companies on the West Coast lobby Washington to get the rules and regulations they need to operate. They're going to resist hugely paying taxes to anybody else. They get the things like net neutrality, issues around data governance. They lobby hard in Washington to get and it depends on which government's in at the time. We've had Trump for 4 years, so what he does is the rules. But the government then, they listen to the big companies, and their data governance issues, which is so important to the internet, are really formed around the fact they've got these big companies there. It's a market force environment. The people that shout the loudest and have the most money will get the rules they want. Shift around the world a bit, you get to Europe. Now, we've just voted to leave Europe, but at the moment we're still in, and we still obey the same rules and regulations. Europe has taken a data protection attitude to the internet, right? Very laudably, and very much influenced by the British, I have to say, they've developed the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. You heard of GDPR? I see some nods. You look it up if you haven't. It basically says, if you want to do anything with anyone's data, like the fact that I'm being live streamed today, you have to get their written consent. And if you want to do something else with that data, other than what they've consented for, you have to go back and get the consent again. This is incredibly visionary and wonderful for the citizen. I describe it as doing AI with both hands tied behind your back. You try developing AI and getting access to data you need to train your algorithms if you're not a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter or or you're not an American company. It's so easy to people say, right, I'll go and work in America, or I could come to India. You don't have GDPR yet. Europe's gone data protection, and basically it's sort of siloing Europe in terms of if you want to sell in Europe digitally, if you want to develop a product that will work in Europe, you have to comply with GDPR, right? And that's really hard for small companies because the law about GDPR is about this thick, and you really need expensive lawyers to tell you what you can and can't do, and small companies can't afford that. Often the answer is you can do it, or there's a way to do it, but it's really hard for small and medium-sized companies to do that. And Europe is going to review GDPR, and hopefully we'll come up with GDPR light. But at the moment, and they're talking about AI regulation, and the dread is that they over-regulate an AI before we know what we're trying to regulate. Shift a bit further around the world, where all our focus is at the moment, for bad reasons. Shift to China. Now, China has 1.4 billion people, about half of whom are on the internet. But China is an authoritarian government. And from the very beginning of the internet in China, they have been monitoring what people do and say and put on the internet. So if you're a company in China, there are data protection regulations for the companies, but the biggest one is the Chinese government can look at anything. Right? That's the rule. This is playing out big time at the moment with the virus, because the virus could have been contained much faster if the government had listened to what people were saying on social media rather than taking it down. We'll see how that plays out in China over the next few years. We don't know how the virus is going to play out yet. But this is major. And it puts the spotlight on the fact that China deals with the internet differently to the rest of the world. So that's our 4 internets. Open and free, the market force-led one in the US, data protection in Europe, the authoritarian one in China. Russia is the spoiler, likes to hack anybody that they can hack, right? And is trying to withdraw from the internet to create a Russian intranet. We'll see how well that is easy, how that's hard to do. We'll see whether they do it. They want to stop their citizens being able to read the rest of the internet. We'll see how that plays out. But they're quite a small population in Russia. I want to finish by saying one more thing, or 2 more things really. Last year, 2019, the web was 30 years old. Tim put the first website up at the end of 1989. Well, 1990 really, but he wrote the manifesto in 1989. And in 30 years, we've got 50% of the planet on the internet. Right? That was the 50-50 moment last year for the world. That's a huge achievement in 30 years. And all the telecoms, mobile phones, all that technology happening to make it possible, but the end result is 50% of the planet on the internet. But the other awesome thing about that is there's still 50% to come onto the internet. Now you think about where that 50% are. They're mostly in rural China, rural India, and Africa. I'll say rural Africa, but Africa's way behind in terms of its cities being online, but it's getting there. Now, we know which way China's gone with the internet, and it's going to be really hard unless this virus kicks them into something else, because it's going to so hit their economy, but we'll see. China's authoritarian on the internet. Africa looks to China. China's hugely invested in Africa in terms of the telecoms and the ability to get on the internet. Africa also looks to India, right? And looks to what you've done with the Aadhaar, and looks to the idea of a national identity program to help them get their citizens on the internet. India has 1.3 billion citizens. China has 1.4. Africa has close to 1 billion, I think, in total. When China, India, and Africa are all on the internet, that will be 3/5 of the internet. that would be very dominant. So the way that India tackles the development of the internet and data governance on the internet, I think, is pivotal to the way the internet develops. And I don't know if you realize the responsibility you have here in this moment in time. And I've joined the board of MOSIP because I believe MOSIP can be a force for good. And I'm going to try and make sure while I'm involved that it doesn't become a force for harm and authoritarian governments to use. And you are so important in that. Please hear my voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hall, for those inspiring words. I don't think anyone in the room will forget those words any soon. I now want to introduce you to Miss Edith Orsilia. She is the Assistant National Statistician at Philippine Statistics Authority. She is going to put forward Philippines' efforts to sorry, we seem to have skipped a session. We will now have a brief introduction to MOSIP. Professor Rajagopalan will give us a quick introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Good evening. This is a very important day in the journey of modular open source identity project. I'll take briefly a few minutes of your time to tell what is it and why are we doing it and how are we governing it. Dame Wendy Hall, while ending her important keynote address, mentioned that India has a huge responsibility to the world in determining how the internet will develop, whether it will develop for a global public good or whether it will develop as a tool in the hands of the governments for surveillance or anybody. So I'm just going to give you a few slides on MOSIP and what is it. Yeah, okay, as you all know that it is a modular open source identity platform. So first question would be that why identity? Why do people need identity? I think you can all hear me? Yeah. Why do people need identity? One of the reasons people need identity, especially poor people, people who are illiterate or semi-literate, is to positively assert their rights as a citizen or a resident to the facilities that government has to provide them. Like for example, in India, education till the age of 14 is a fundamental right. We have something known as a right to education. If a poor mother or father have to assert that right that free education must be given to their children, how do they assert? Similarly, there are benefits, like we have the employment program, health program. How do you assert this? Across the world, this assertion of the right was a kind of a issue. That is, the barriers to access the basic services. And why is it important? Nearly 1 billion people in the world do not have any identity. Another couple of billion people have got problematic identity, multiple identity. Most of you are young, so you would not know this. Some few years ago, I think till the 1980 elections or 84 elections, if you go a bit late to the election to cast your vote, they would say that somebody has already come and voted on your behalf, you know. We don't have the voter slip in those days, voter's ID, and people can just vote in your name. So there was this whole question of imposters stealing away the rights of the poor people. But huge diversion of grains in the ration shop, huge diversion of money from employment program, and not only in India but across the world. So one is to prevent such stealing away of the benefits. Second is to give the rights to the poor people. Governments across the world felt that there must be some kind of a non-duplicable ID system. We need to have an identity which is non-duplicable, which is unique, and which should be used universally. And that was a need for a digital ID system. Anyway, and many countries in the world, including United Kingdom and Estonia, Argentina, they had started identity system for their citizens and residents long back. And they had all adopted certain technologies to provide this. India adopted a system, as you all know, in 2009 called Aadhaar. Many countries have done this. And there are three major problems with most of those systems. One is that these were built as a custom product for a country by a vendor, and so there was lack of interoperability between that system and another system. Second, the country started depending on the vendor. There was a technology and vendor lock-in, and once you get locked into a vendor, the cost goes up. So it also became a high-cost system. And because of this, many countries, the identity systems were floundering, or they were high cost. For a developed economy like UK or Estonia or Norway or something, the cost didn't really matter. But when it came to Africa, Asia, Latin America, the costs were prohibitive, and countries were not really keen, saying, why should we invest so much money into this and also get locked into some vendor and we have to be dependent upon them? And that was the motivation for, so that was a motivation to start doing something in MOSIP. MOSIP has some fundamental assumptions. One is that we wanted to make it completely open source. The reason for making it open source, first is we have a platform approach. That means MOSIP is not a sealed, boxed product. MOSIP is a platform on which people will build solutions. So that was our first decision, saying that don't give a closed, boxed product, give a platform on which countries, organizations, MOSIP can even be used by universities and any kind of organizations. They can build their own solutions that meet their specific requirement, which is situated in their context. So it is first a platform. Second, MOSIP, because it's a platform and because it is modular and because it is based on open standards and its code is also in open, today MOSIP 1.0 is already available in GitHub. MOSIP also makes it easy for integrating with the country's existing systems or a new system which they would like to develop. Say, for example, a country already has
a birth and death registration system, which we call a civil registry, then the MOSIP can be integrated into their birth and death registration system. MOSIP could be integrated into a banking system, MOSIP could be integrated into a health system. So system integration becomes easy and almost like any country could use it for that purpose. So the principles of MOSIP is that we said it is open source first, because we wanted the contribution to MOSIP from across the world by anybody who wants to contribute. Second, we said it should be configurable, which is what I talked about. How do you configure it to a country? It is modular. The modular is important. Like say for a country, for some reasons feels they don't want to use biometric, they don't want photograph, they don't want fingerprint, they don't want iris scan, but they still want identity system. MOSIP can provide an identity system without biometric. It can provide identity system with biometric, without biometric. Let's say a country wants to print out an identity card. MOSIP can attach to a printer program and print identity cards. Another country may not want to do a printing of the identity card, they might want to send just a SMS, it could do the SMS. So MOSIP is modular in that nature and people could just pick and choose. It's almost like Lego building blocks. You know, you could have a bucket of Lego blocks and then you can make what you want out of that. And we have made it in a way that it is scalable. Philippines, our friends are here, Philippines is 101 million population. Morocco is 36 million population, and we are also working with Guinea in West Africa, which is about 5 million population or less, 10 million population. So this is scalable across all population counts. We have made it, designed it in scalable. Later, Ramesh and others will answer. Puneet, I think, is going to take you to some walkthrough on that. They will answer some questions on that. And this is two things. Professor Hall talked about data protection. Privacy and data protection here is built into the design and architecture of the MOSIP. To give you an example, that a resident who is given an identification number using MOSIP can lock the system saying, don't authenticate me for some period. He can open it at his will. Somewhat similar to, most of you would not know, when we had only the terrestrial phones and subscriber trunk dialing means long distance dialing were very expensive. It was 1 rupee a second if you want to talk to Bombay. So we used to have a lock called STD lock. We can lock the phone so that others can't make the long distance calls. Similar kind of lock we have introduced here, and people could lock their authentication, not lock their authentication. Second, they can also configure what information is shared with whom, what information is not shared. Should a bank get your address? Should a bank get your date of birth? Should a bank get something? People could configure. Third is, they can get a virtual token. Instead of using their number, they can get a virtual number which they can use for some time. Fourth is, they will be intimated at every time when their identity is used, who used it, for what purpose, and we are building a consent framework now that even that would happen, that sharing will, or authentication will happen only on consent. The consent may be through OTP, consent may be through internet, but there will be a consent mechanism. So we are building. So the privacy protection, data protection is built in. Like for example, all the data is encrypted at the time of collection, on the flight when the data leaves the machine and goes to the server, and in the server. So it's completely encrypted and controlled by the user. That's how we are doing this. So we talked about why MOSIP earlier. That is, for one is to give the foundation ID so that people can access their rights, and it would create the effective service delivery for governments. It enables people for financial inclusion, and it reduces the friction and cost of business for people. And these are the modules currently what we have: pre-registration, registration, registration processor, authentication, and resident services. These are the current modules. And now it's open. people can think of their modules. Like for example, somebody was saying that how about making this on blockchain so that it is distributed architecture and ledger based. I said, go ahead and do it. You fork the MOSIP, it is MPL 2.0 license, so you could create what you want to create and put it back into the GitHub. So others can make use of it. So that's open. So that's what we are saying now, that since it is in the open domain and it is available to all, people could download, configure, use it. People could build systems. People could link it to your health system or link it to your land registration system or link it to something. So currently 2 countries, as Professor Shadagopan said, Morocco and Philippines have adopted. Philippines, we had put in starting November a kind of a pilot sandbox so that the officers of the Philippines government can get a hands-on experience, and I'm glad to say that more than 10,000 registrations have happened in that small sandbox, which including all the members of the Philippines, all the senators of the Philippines parliament. They have gone and registered all of them. And Morocco is just kickstarting that. And in fact, in June, there is a conference called ID for Africa in Morocco, and where they will showcase how they are using MOSIP. So this is what we would want from you. One is that develop and support the platform. It's out in the open. There are some requests, there are some further enhancement that people could do. We will keep coming out with a register of such requests and enhancement. Please contribute to develop code or test the existing code, improve the documentation, improve the current code, whatever is it, or create a completely new product. And we would like the community to help and support the countries which are accepting. And then what we promise to do is we will develop an ecosystem built around MOSIP. There will be commercial organizations who will provide support the way Red Hat provided support for Linux. And we have Satish here who used to head the Red Hat here. So we would create such. Last 2 days we had a workshop for system integrators. Close to about 25 companies and 50 participants from across the world were here to understand what is MOSIP, how they can work with MOSIP, how they can take MOSIP to their countries and do that. So that's how we want to grow this system. I think with that I would end my presentation. Thank you. I come back here if there is questions at a later time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor. It is now the right time to invite Ms. Edith. Yeah. We have with us Ms. Edith Orsilia. She represents Government of Philippines. She is the Assistant National Statistician, Policy Coordination and Monitoring Service, Philippine Statistics Authority. She has also served as Assistant National Statistician of Civil Registration Service as well. Ms. Orsilia holds Masters in Public Management and has risen through the ranks of PSA and has served at various capacity throughout her career. Ma'am, may I invite you to the stage?
Good afternoon to everyone. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat in Filipino. That's our language. Happy Hearts Day. It's Valentine's Day today, and we're still here working, doing a presentation. So in behalf of the Philippine Statistics Authority, the management of the PSA. We would like to thank the organizers, the IIIT-B, for inviting PSA to participate in this MOSIP Open Source Day, to share the Philippines' vision of digital transformation and the role of MOSIP that will play in our endeavor. I would like also to introduce to you my colleague in the PhilSys Registry Office. He is with me, the Division Chief of the Infrastructure and the Systems Management Division, Mr. Robert Coronado, a division in charge for the preparation of the bidding docs, bidding documents for our systems integrator for the PhilSys. Mr. Robert, he is the one. He is one of our IT officials of the PhilSys Registry Office. So PhilSys Registry Office, or PRO, is a very new office in the Philippine Statistics Authority. You might be wondering why an office concerning an identity or identification is lodged with the Philippine Statistics Authority. Also, civil registration. Civil registration is also a part of the mandate of the PSA. So we're still crafting our vision and mission to include this new work or task, a huge work actually, to the PSA in order to deliver what the law asks us to do. So, we have prepared, actually, a 20-minute speech, but I think, please bear with me, because it's our first time to share what is happening in the Philippines about, well, it's a foundational ID. Who is helping us? What are the systems that we're using? And I think that's the reason why we were invited to be in this activity. The Philippines has long recognized the particular importance of the IT sector, similar to other countries, and consequently passed and implemented a handful of long-term action plans. We have so many action plans to tap this resource. With most Filipinos being digitally connected, our government saw the need to start our country's digital transformation towards a digital economy. The Philippine Digital Transformation Study 2022 is the amalgamation of our country's existing and future plans towards our journey to digital transformation. Our government is putting significant efforts into the digitization of our public services. It's very important. As outlined in this strategy released in 2019, the goal is to have fully integrated and deployed e-government systems by 2022 that will lead to the improvement of Philippine governance, socio-economic development, and public services to Filipinos. It is a 3-year development plan aimed at transforming the government into a digital platform, providing transparent and accountable governance, efficient operations, direct citizen engagement, and innovation. Further, as a member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or the ASEAN, the Philippines is committed to achieving the strategic thrusts of the 2020 ASEAN ICT Master Plan. The plan aims to propel member countries towards a digitally enabled economy that is secured, sustainable, and transformative, in enabling an innovative, inclusive, integrated Asian community. It goes without saying that this vision and pursuit of the Philippines government towards digital transformation is not an easy path. It is most definitely not cost-free. And it is clear that we have to start within and design an inclusive plan to realize a digitally strong and competitive economy. The Philippines is one of the few remaining countries without a foundational identification system beyond our civil registration system, and the only one in ASEAN. So we have the law last 2018 because of a very decisive precedent, a law on identification was passed. While the coverage of our birth registration is at 93.6%, it's quite high. According to our 2010 Census of Population and Housing, the overall identification landscape in the Philippines can still be described as inefficient, fragmented, and to some extent exclusionary, especially for the poor, which effectively undermines the Philippines' development. Our identification and authentication systems remain to be manual and independent of one another, hence creating costly transactions for our citizens, both direct and indirect. The current situation called for a consolidated foundational ID that will provide a valid proof of identity to the poor and at the same time will jumpstart the creation of an interconnected digital ID ecosystem to improve the lives of all citizens and residents of the Philippines by making access, delivery, and administration of government and private transaction services easier, more secure, and more responsive to the people's needs. Hence, we have the law, we call it Republic Act number 11055, which was passed in 2018. The country's Philippine Identification System, or we call it the PhilSys Act. The objectives of the PhilSys are straightforward: to establish a single national identification system, to provide a valid proof of identity for all its citizens and resident aliens, and to eliminate the need to present other forms of identification when transacting with the government and private sector. So you will see in the Philippines, if you are going to open a bank account, you have to present more than 2 IDs as much as possible. So the basic roles of the PhilSys are to create a unique and secure digital identity for each PhilSys number holder, so we call it a PhilSys number, allow that digital legal identity to be controlled by the registered person, and reliably verified both in person and online for both government and private sector transactions. So essentially, the Philippine government aims to build an interoperable platform and public infrastructure that can reach scale more quickly and cost efficiently, taking advantage of relevant emerging digital technologies, minimizing the data to be collected and managed by the PhilSys to core identity attributes that are useful to day-to-day transactions is a deliberate measure to safeguard data protection and privacy. So it's only minimal data per law will be collected. The PhilSys will transform the government and private sectors in the Philippines by digitalizing and automating the identification and verification process of Filipinos and resident aliens, fundamental processes in accessing, delivery, and administering services. It will make services more accessible, promote ease of doing business, enhance the integrity of services, and reduce fraud, enable and promote citizen participation, and trust in digital government and digital economy, and empower Filipinos and resident aliens with greater control over their personal data. Where are we now with PhilSys? So it is my pleasure to report to you that since the start of our pilot testing in September 2019, because per law, we are supposed to start the registration a year after the signing, a year after the law is passed. So the PSA has successfully registered more than 11,000 actually to the PhilSys. So these are some sample pictures which we got. So we have a closed registration center and a center, an open registration center. So in line with our approved implementation plan, we had an agency-to-agency hopping to test the processes and systems among employees of the government. The PhilSys law mentions about a council. Although the PSA was mentioned to be responsible in implementing the PhilSys law, there was a council that was created per law. And the different national agencies of the government are part of that council. And the agency-to-agency hopping we did, we started with the member agencies of the council. So first, we have the House of Representatives of the Philippines. They made the request so early. They want to experience how to be enrolled in the PhilSys. And after that, the PSA employees. Then we also have, pilot registration also in our Department of Budget and Management, Department of Finance, and so many other agencies. So we obtained good insights from our run during the last quarter of 2019. And our team is using our learnings as a springboard in improving our registration process and systems. The pilot test registration will continue until such time the systems and processes are perfected in preparation for our mass registration activities. So it is only a pilot. So when we say a pilot, we just want to test the processes, the business rules, the registration forms, etc. So right now, we are still fixing some learnings or observations that we have in our pilot testing, and then afterwards, we will have to do the mass registration. So when we say mass registration, then we have to go from one place to another to enroll all the Filipinos with a target that by 2022, before President Duterte steps down, majority of the Filipinos are enrolled in the PhilSys. In terms of procurement, the PSA has successfully procured 5,000 registration kits in line with our implementation. So we have some kits. In addition to the peripherals, the kit contains the laptop, fingerprint and iris scanners, camera, and printer for the registration process. On the other hand, the procurement of our automated biometric identification platform for biometric deduplication is ongoing and is expected to be delivered within the first semester of 2020. The systems integrator, meanwhile, is at the initial stages of procurement, where the PSA technical team and our development partners, the World Bank and the ADB, continue to develop technical documents to ensure its comprehensiveness. Establishing the Philippines National ID System is a huge undertaking. That is why the PSA is committed to ensure that only the best PhilSys is enjoyed by Filipinos and resident aliens alike. This is our motivation in conducting a series of pilot testing, while all other procurement items are ongoing before launching our system to the public to ensure the integrity, the efficiency, and security of our systems and processes. Before I discuss the role of MOSIP, it's a very important one, in the establishment of the PhilSys and consequently to the overall framework of the Philippine Digital Transformation Strategy, allow me first to take us all back in time for a brief history of how the PhilSys partnership with MOSIP came to be. So in 2017, the PSA crafted an architecture design for a national ID with the Philippine Department of Information and Communications Technology. That was in 2019. A subsequent study tour here in India involving relevant government agencies in the Philippines gave the PSA an inkling as to how we want our national ID to be executed and implemented. I believe that right there and then, we knew that our national ID will be patterned to adhere. In fact, we were aiming for a functional ID originally, but upon witnessing firsthand how a foundational ID such as adhere works towards improvement of the lives of all citizens, we shifted our focus to realizing a foundational ID for the Philippines instead. So a group of government officials from the national government came to India, particularly IIIT, and I think that was a time wherein the Philippines said, yes, we are going to use MOSIP. So the role of MOSIP in the successful establishment of our national ID and in pursuit of our country's Philippine digital transformation cannot be overemphasized. In fact, MOSIP is indispensable in terms of ensuring the project requirements of the PhilSys, and that it will be met and be delivered to Filipinos on time as promised. Way before the PhilSys was passed in September 2018 and took effect a year after, the PSA already recognized that developing an efficient PhilSys is no easy feat, especially after benchmarking how other countries needed a handful of years just to build preliminary systems for their national IDs. MOSIP plays a significant role in helping the PSA achieve what was envisioned of the PhilSys by both the lawmakers and our countrymen. To a large extent, MOSIP's overall architecture is what makes platforms successfully and continually satisfy the demands of PhilSys. As an open source solution, the overall architecture is easily the most advantageous attribute of MOSIP in relation to our implementation back home. As a major undertaking of the Philippine government and at the same time a pioneer development project in our country, the PhilSys program entails various complexities and intricacies that may arise outside our regular planning sessions. Hence, what the PSA truly requires to effectively implement our national ID system is flexibility. Flexibility in managing not only the overall project, but most especially the technological aspect of the program. MOSIP's microservices approach gives us this flexibility that we need in terms of technology. Through the core application or MOSIP kernel, troubleshooting technical issues that pose difficulties for our technical team. In fact, MOSIP being a decoupled system and allowing changes in one system without affecting the other gives the PSA the freedom to enhance the PhilSys as efficiently and effectively as we could, ultimately to ensure that Filipinos get the best national ID they rightfully deserve. MOSIP's modular architecture cannot also be discounted in giving the PSA the flexibility we need. I believe that the modularization of the MOSIP is what truly sets it apart from other national ID platforms by ascertaining openness to countries such as ours in implementing and configuring our foundational ID system. The array of options offered through MOSIP's modular architecture is a huge plus for the technical team behind the PhilSys. Since every feature of the application is handled as a separate plug and play service, our technical team worries less about facing interoperability issues. MOSIP is also open standard and open source. MOSIP as an open source solution works to the advantage of the PSA in the long run by allowing our team of developers to improve the PhilSys along with the MOSIP over time. The source code being made available for use or modification by our technical team as they see fit drives innovation, flexibility, and security. So in contrast to proprietary software solutions, MOSIP, in tandem with PhilSys, shall remain to be on the cutting-edge technology in whichever direction it chooses to because of its configurability and customizability. So delving on proprietary software solutions, the PhilSys, as the Philippines' first foundational ID, is vulnerable to the risk of vendor lock-in among commercial solutions. So in establishing a digital ID system, it is no question that the technology is complex and would entail substantial costs to the government. So finally, above all, MOSIP adheres to privacy by design. So with our Data Privacy Act of 2012, the PS is serious and committed to ensuring the PhilSys program values data privacy and security to the highest standards. So with regards to the journey of the Philippines towards digital transformation, MOSIP's role is as crucial as ever. No? So having said all of this, the challenge I have for MOSIP is simple. To be the core technology solution of foundational ID systems at what you have committed and promised. From your module on principles of engagement, I quote, MOSIP was envisaged to provide an open-source solution to tackle the problems related to digital identity systems, particularly that of closed, proprietary technology, and consequent vendor lock-in. It has been created as a global public good, a core for foundational digital systems that enable the issuer to accelerate progress towards inclusive, privacy-centric, and secure identity. So this is a loaded promise, but with how MOSIP is operating in the present time and how I see its impact on the PhilSys in being a trustworthy ID system in the Philippines, I have little doubts on MOSIP's capacity to deliver. MOSIP right now is at the forefront and in a highly strategic position to drastically transform the landscape of technology solutions for digital ID systems. So MOSIP is crucial to the establishment of the Philippines digital ID system as the core technology of the PhilSys, and it's my desire to see the same impact we are experiencing now to witness MOSIP take part in the successful execution of other digital ID systems worldwide. Before I end this message, well, we have an ABP presentation during our during the September 2 event, so it's no more. Okay. So with that, we just hope we have given you some important points why we chose MOSIP in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Edith. We're very happy to partner with Philippines, and they are certainly an example to a lot of other countries, the way they are adopting progressive and open source technologies which will bring in more transparency and more accountability to various government programs. And we are certainly up to the challenge of raising the game with MOSIP being the sought-after platform for all digital identification systems. So let us move forward. We have our colleague, Mr. Puneet Joshi, who will take us through some of our plans in the near future and some of our larger plans, and lay out what are the areas in which some of you can effectively contribute and create a truly open digital public good in identity. Puneet, over to you.
Thank you, Arun. Wonderful to see you all here today, and all those who are watching this through live streaming and in this beautiful venue. So what I will do is I will just tell you in brief where we are right now when it comes to MOSIP, where is MOSIP heading, and where all of you can contribute to make MOSIP even better. So as we speak, February 14 today, we have released the 1.0 version of MOSIP. It is, I think, 1.06. It's on GitHub for you to download and take a look. What we have in this is we have all the two fundamental blocks that we need for identity. One is the identity lifecycle, which is basically registration processor and update of your UIN, lost UIN cases, and so on. So those modules are there. We also have the authentication module. It's all in place. So these two major modules are there in MOSIP right now. We also have some reference UIs for example, for registration. It's a registration client, and though MOSIP is an API system, but still we need to give some reference implementations for SIs to build for a country. And so we have reference implementations for a registration client. We have a Windows-based application there, and we also have pre-registration module. We have automated test rigs for testing MOSIP. And as MOSIP started with certain design principles of modularity, scalability, privacy, and security, so all these have been incorporated in the version that we have released now. As we speak, of course, while the version is released, we are still doing deployment automation scripts. Performance tuning is, of course, an ongoing process. We are tuning the performance, making it better. Security testing is going on, defect fixes, of course, and we are improving the documentation and doing code reviews. Yeah. So in terms of roadmap, so we have 1.0 right now. We would be releasing 1.1, 1.2, and so on. And so right now in Q2, the objective is to fix, of course, the defects and do the performance tuning, get performance numbers in place for you to estimate, like for example, how many servers, how many hardware is needed. We are doing the testing right now. In the second quarter, we should be done with this. There are a bunch of security enhancements that we are working on. Deployment is has been a challenge in terms of the complexity of the system, and hence there have been questions on how do I deploy MOSIP. The procedures are too complex. And so right now we are writing scripts, automated scripts, to deploy MOSIP. And we should have good level of scripts in the second quarter. By Q3, one of the things we definitely want to achieve is have a biometrics partners kit. Now, MOSIP heavily depends on partners for devices, the software they provide, ABIS, and so on. And the vendors have to integrate their devices, their systems with MOSIP. And so the easier we make it for them, it's better. And so by Q3, we hope to have a nice test kit for the biometric devices and ABIS and tools so that they can use and integrate with MOSIP easily. We would also have some kind of a reporting framework to have basic reporting in place. Now, a system like MOSIP requires many kinds of reporting. For example, how many registrations are happening, how many auths are happening, or what is the health of the system, what is the performance level right now, and so on. And so we would put a reporting framework in place with some basic canned reports. Deployment is, again, an ongoing activity where we continuously improve our scripts. And one of the ideas for what we call as deployment 2.0 is the scripts for also scalability and monitoring. Here we have, as far as deployment is concerned, we have something called a cell-based approach for deployment, which makes scalability and elasticity a lot more easier for SIs to scale the whole system. And so we hope to put some scripts there for SIs to use for actual deployments in production. And by the end of this year, I think as far as the roadmap of the road for 1.x goes, I think it will probably come to an end of this year, where we would consider this version as a long-term support version. We will continue to support this version with documentation and etc. We would also have some extra things like partners, certification guidelines, tools, and more reference apps. So there's a lot of demand for more apps, for example, a tablet-based registration app, and so on. So we hope to put in more apps over there for SIs to take it and integrate with a country system. It should be, what our main objective is, MOSIP should be very easy to deploy with a country. And so we are trying to kind of make all those aspects easier. From 1.0, I think we have ideas, we have plans for making it 2.0, which would will have lots of interesting features that we would really aspire to put in MOSIP, but right now, because of the constraints of resource and time, we have not been able to put all these things. But this is something that we aspire, that can we have interoperability in authentication? Like, for example, can you authenticate a person in 2 different countries who use MOSIP? Can we do that? And so interoperability across countries, or let's say you have a union of countries, can they use the same ID? Can I authenticate with the same ID in different countries in Africa, and so on? So that's something that we will be looking at. There are different technologies for credentials coming in. You can authenticate using an app or a card, so we would like to include more and more of these technologies in MOSIP for authentication. There is, the authentication need not be central, need not be centralized. It could be decentralized, and there could be different authentication programs. Sorry. Okay, this is louder, I think. Reduce the volume. Okay, there could be different auth providers, and it's called federated authentication system. And so we would like to have all the tools and the software in place for a federated auth. As I said, there has been a lot of demand for tablet-based registration. So, if you're experts on Androids and any other OSs who can actually implement the registration client on a tablet, that'll be very useful, and that's what we'll aim for. Offline authentication, I don't know whether you have seen this, but you can have your auth done using a QR code, where you just put your app looks at the QR code and says, yeah, this is your photograph and this has come from the right source. So you need apps like those. It's called offline authentication. You need not be connected to the internet for that. So we would look to develop such apps. When you talk about deploying MOSIP in any country, the first question, a lot of countries and everybody asks is, can it integrate with our CRVS system? And yes, MOSIP has hooks to integrate with the existing system, but we want to make it much more easier for this integration, and we would be aiming for that. Now, privacy is again an ongoing topic. New technologies and new ideas keep coming up. We would be looking at something called a consent framework, which makes the whole consent much more sophisticated than what it is right now, where an individual can really decide what information to give whom and with users' consent. And we need a framework for that. It is a little bit ad hoc at the moment all over the world in some sense. So we want to make it more detailed and sophisticated, the consent framework. In fact, one of the UNIVs who is working with us has decided to work on the consent framework. Then there is the question of audit log. Well, how to preserve the logs of the system. If somebody does tampering, how to preserve these logs so that logs themselves are not tampered. There are suggestions for using blockchain. So any of those technologies, if they need to be used, then we would be looking at them in 2.0. Zero knowledge system, we would like to have less and less of knowledge footprint inside the system. So for example, today we are capturing the original biometrics. Do we really need to do that, or we could just keep the templates of the biometrics rather than keeping the images at all in the system? So we could look at such zero-knowledge systems. And of course, for deployment in a country, we need very quick implementation. We need tools. We need lots of connecting softwares and so on. And we hope to get many more in place in 2.0 for faster deployment. So overall, I mean, if you look at MOSIP's program roadmap, ultimately, MOSIP wants to enable to deliver services and benefits to large population in the world. And we wouldn't want to restrict it to certain countries. We would like MOSIP to go global, different countries where there is a need. And we would also like to create something called a MOSIP marketplace, where all the vendors and partners in our system, they can put out the code, they can put out the devices or software for sale with a price, and countries can quickly see and choose what is available and pick it up for the integration. So we would like something like a MOSIP marketplace. Open standards is something that we will continue to support all the time. And as I said, the knowledge of MOSIP for any consulting, for any advice, it need not be in one place, it should be in other places. So we will look at setting up knowledge centers with the help of universities in Africa and other countries, where a lot more expertise of MOSIP lies in those areas and regions, and they can take local help when they're deploying the systems. And of course, active community support. We need all of your community and a lot more to support this initiative. And I'm just going to talk about where all you can contribute. There's tons to be done, and we will look forward to the community contributing in MOSIP. Okay, now these are just some of the ideas we have on where you all can contribute as open source. And I didn't want to make it like straight lines, so I put it all here and there. But some of these words are, we have been talking about, for example, blockchain. But how can blockchain help here is something that the open source community can look at and maybe integrate and just enhance the whole platform. We need your help in security, the security experts here. Database sharding, there are always areas to improve on performance and so on. So any experts on databases can surely contribute here. Mobile apps is, of course, a big area where we need all kinds of apps. So whoever's are experts in apps can contribute. Fraud analytics. Now that's a very important module which currently MOSIP does not have. And so how do you detect a fraud happening in the system? Let's say just a simple example. Let's say 2 authentications happen almost simultaneously from 2 different cities. Just a very trivial example. So can you develop a fraud analytics system, a fraud detection system, using the logs of MOSIP or using the data and so on? So fraud analytics is a very big area that we would look forward the community to help us. Ethical hacking. If you are good hackers, please hack the system as much as possible. Tell us, but do tell us what the results of, and not just tell us, please fix those in the system. But yeah, we'll really encourage you to test this product, find out any problems. We have taken a lot of care in making sure that things are in place, but yet there could be cracks. And we would love the community to help us in fixing those. Instant ID. Today, if you want to get an ID, you may have to wait surely for a few hours or maybe days, depending on how fast the whole process works. And in theory, or rather also in practice, you can issue an ID almost instantly while the person is sitting right at the desk. Everything is automated. So why shouldn't the person get an ID immediately? And to work towards such a system we call Instant ID. You can help us there. There are new biometrics methods coming, like somebody told me that the iris can be scanned 10 feet away by your system. You don't have to look into that binoculars kind of stuff. So it can be done today. So can we have contactless biometric devices integrated and so on? So plenty of interesting stuff for all of you. And we would look forward to having your contributions to MOSIP. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet, for laying out our vision of where we want to go. Definitely, community support is a big aspect of what we want to do. And we want to incorporate all the feedback we get from implementation in the countries, different kind of use cases where MOSIP can be put to use. And we want to develop a user group which really makes this platform thrive. We want to spend the next 30 minutes taking questions from the audience that are here and also from our live streaming. This will be an Ask Us Anything model. There are mics all around you. Please raise your hand so that the question is communicated to everyone. I would like to invite Professor Rajagopalan and Mr. Ramesh Narayanan to anchor the session, please.
Any questions or anything you want to suggest, not necessarily question, but also suggestion for us to note down and work upon?
Good evening, Professor.
Yeah.
Here,
Yes.
Hemchandra here. Who's the regulatory body as of now for this initiative? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. Is there a regulatory body who assesses the submissions, and who's the deciding authority per se now? That number two is like, if you want to communicate with the core team as such, and like say, for example, one of the areas that I would like to contribute, what would be the communication mechanism with the centralized
Okay.
team?
First is MOSIP has two governing mechanism. One is an executive committee, which has a number of people, some drawn from the IIIT-Bangalore, some from the donors who are funding this program, and some individuals. They form the executive committee to make most of the management decisions. Then we have two very important groups. There is an international advisory group in which Professor Wendy Hall is a member. We have members from North America, we have members from Europe, we have members from Africa, we have members from Asia, like Professor Tanuchit from Thailand, we have Tomaika Tillman, who is the Blockchain Council chair of USA. We have a number of them. So the International Advisory Group meets twice a year. And the Executive Committee meets actually once a month on a call. International Advisory Group meets twice a year. They are the one who will actually watch us and then provide us the guidelines or corrections, whatever we need to do. On the code side and the documentation side, we have a technology committee. The technology committee is the ultimate authority to see what goes into the GitHub, what documents, what procedures, what code, when will it go, how will it go, and they are also the authority to accept contribution from the community, test it, and then commit the code. So we have a process for commitment of the code. We have, like Ramesh and others are part of a group called the Core Program Unit, what we call a CPU. So code will be first, they would review it, and after their interaction with whoever has submitted the code, it will get tested. After the code is tested and then test results are out, it will go to the technology committee. Technology committee will look at its feasibility, is it necessary now, how to put it, and then technology committee will take a decision to publish it in the GitHub. So it will get published in the GitHub with a contribution by so-and-so. Your second question, how do I contact people? MOSIP.io is the website in which all this happens. So if you go to MOSIP.io and then you can send a mail to anybody who is marked there, or cpu@mosip.io. That would come saying that this is what we would want to contact. Like last time when there was a program somewhat similar to it by the Open Source for You magazine, we had a conference in Nimhan's auditorium. At the end of the conference, about 130 people signed up. saying that they would like to be interested and they would like to be informed and they would like to contribute. So all those who sign up get a monthly newsletter saying what has happened this month. And that is, you could send mail, you could participate, you could, this is the way you can do. Just, you could get onto the list, or you can send a simple mail, info@mosip.io or cpu@mosip.io. These will help. It is there on the website. Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, please. Micro. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, my question is on the aspect of what kind of use cases or application which can be developed using the platform. What would be the engagement model? For example, the team at IIIT-B, would they be keen on some sort of POC or some sort of application development?
Yeah, it's a bit early now because we have just released 1.0. What we have still under discussion, we are saying is that people who want to build, let's say on top of it application. The reason why we chose MPL 2.0 as our licensing model, we could have also chosen GPL 3.0. We could have chosen something else. The reason why we chose MPL 2.0 is MPL, that Mozilla Public License, permits people to use the open source platform or open source code, and on top of it, even build proprietary products. What it permits is that anybody could download MOSIP and start building. For a simple reason, let's say that you want to have a fintech product on top of the MOSIP where you want to say make some peer-to-peer payment system. You could create that peer-to-peer payment system on top of the MOSIP. The MPL 2.0 only requires that whenever you distribute your entire system, which is packaged MOSIP and your peer-to-peer payment system, you have to give the source code of the MOSIP along with that licensing condition, Mozilla 2.0, and your part of the thing could be proprietary. So what we are planning to do is, for helping such people who want to do, we would encourage them to develop products and take help of our team in understanding more clearly and test it in our test beds and things like that. If you want to test it, we would provide you some kind of access to test it and give you help of how to test, etc. That's what we are planning to do. But the product finally is your product.
We would like the ecosystem to actually build solutions on top of MOSIP rather than us building these solutions. So that's why it's a building block.
In fact, some African company, TechBrain, I think they may be here also, they were talking to us saying that they are already engaging with number of African countries in providing systems. Like, for example, they have done a driving license system for a country and they have done a passport for another country. So they say that they would like to use MOSIP to be the founding block on which they will develop their own products, whether it is a driving license product or a passport product or a birth certificate product. They will build the products like that. Any other questions on technology, on policy, or any? Yeah.
I'm asking questions on behalf of the online audience.
Okay.
Yeah. How will MOSIP decide what features go into the roadmap, and how will the priority of the features be decided?
We have a general sense of what we want to do, and there are certain guiding principles that we have when we built MOSIP. So we use that as the filter to look at what's priority and what's not. One of the most important things is to make sure that the countries which are adopting MOSIP, they get what they really need as what is discovered from the field that's missing. That kind of takes top priority over everything else. And apart from that, we talked earlier about the themes that we have, what we are looking forward to. So the idea of building MOSIP itself is to enable service delivery on top of MOSIP. MOSIP is not the end objective here. MOSIP is an enabler. So we will continue to actively work on features which are important for making it easier to build solutions on top of MOSIP. So one of the things that we talked about, the rapid implementation. So how can a country take MOSIP and quickly go live? Anything that we can work towards that, that will get a priority. How do you use the MOSIP service delivery capabilities like the authentication features? How do we make sure that a lot of use cases can be built easily for various scenarios? What components and services can be built for that or encourage the market to build? That will be the focus. So the themes that we talked about earlier, so they are the ones actually we'll be using to prioritize. But having said that, any brilliant idea can come out of any corner. Everything will be considered, and we will see, hey, if it's disruptive, if it's going to make a big difference, we'll obviously consider it.
See, I will just add, anybody is welcome to suggest saying that what should be the product roadmap. That is the idea of being open source. But we have a mechanism by which saying that, how are we going to prioritize? There will be a live register where we will record all such requests, recommendations, contributions. But it will be prioritized based on the needs of adopters. Adopters could be countries, adopters could be large organizations, adopters could be other, like a financial bank or whatever. Based on the adopters, we will prioritize this, and it will finally get decided by the technology committee. What thing will go into GitHub at what date will be decided by the technology. But people are free to build their own products, either in open source or in proprietary.
I'll take example of maybe WordPress. See, WordPress has a lot of features, but if you look at it, there's a WordPress marketplace which does a whole bunch of things. So if these solutions are already available out there and very easy to access, some of them free or affordably priced and so on, there may not be an overwhelming need to go and build that in or incorporate that into the platform unless it's really core, right? So we will actually have plenty of options, marketplace plus what goes into MOSIP, what's there in other open source or proprietary platforms which we can integrate with. And together we will look at, see what is really essential, what gets us the most value for the time and effort invested in it. So we look at all these things and then take a call. And that is where the committees, the people who are there mentioned earlier would be there. And where possible, we will also obviously try to be as democratic as possible, invite opinion from the community. And of course, nobody is stopping anybody from building and contributing to MOSIP, right? If you say, hey, this is not a priority, but you build it and it's ready, we're not going to say, hey, we'll not put it in MOSIP. We'll obviously make it available either as part of the core platform or in the marketplace as a free add-on, right? So no effort is going to go waste, nothing's going to be hidden or swept aside.
Hi. Hello. Hello. Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, hi. Sanjeev here. So one question I had was with respect to marketplace and the third-party applications, right? How are we going to ensure that it doesn't become an opportunity for someone to actually steal data, right? So
I can't hear. Can you speak a bit louder? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question was, when it comes to marketplace and any other third-party applications that attach onto the system, how do we make sure that it's not becoming a source of data theft, if not for anything good? Thanks.
Not becoming a source for?
For data theft, right? I mean,
okay.
You are giving an open standard that basically makes it everyone much more easier to get into the system, right? And when you are talking about authenticity or the biometric match or something like that, how does it really become a place where it's not being used only to not just do something good, but also steal data?
Yeah. You want
yeah. So I think we would welcome answers to this from the community also on what is the right way to do, because on one hand, we don't want to stifle innovation. On the other hand, we want to make sure that the right kind of solutions are being taken up. And that's where I think the system integrators who come in and actually implement solutions for countries, they play a big role. They have to make sure that they choose the right set of tools that are available from the variety of choices out there and make sure the right ones go in. So there is a process of certification, for example, in using devices or tools and also some evaluation has to be done and some due diligence has to happen before it's adopted, right? And then there is always community which can help this evaluation and certification process.
So another thing this is still in the works, we have a feeling that if the system becomes more transparent to the user for a citizen or a resident, in a sense that there is a consent framework in place, so at any time, like for example, if somebody is using an authentication device to buy a SIM card, let's just take that use case. But before authentication is done, if that person is informed through a SMS or some message that this particular mobile phone operator who is planning to sell you a SIM wants this data, can I give or not? And then you give the data only on that yes, and getting that kind of a consent. So we are trying to build consent framework where not only data will be transferred only when you consent, and we can also have mechanism by which saying that till what time, how do we do this, but it's still evolving field. Because what happens is that what happens to the, for example, that under the Indian Data Protection Bill, which is Sri Krishna Committee recommendation, there is a recommendation which says that transactional data shall not be stored for more than 6 months. Like for example, even under the Supreme Court judgment, there is a judgment which says that in the Aadhaar case, they say the authentication logs should not be stored for more than 3 months or something like that. So that will be another way, but that is the policy, and that is a consent framework we can build. How do you implement it? That would depend upon how vigilant the community is. So I think we need to also have a fairly long educational program to make the community more vigilant of the possibility of misuse and to prevent that.
Adding to that, one of the reasons why MOSIP is open source is that you can have more confidence in it. More eyes can look at it, and we can find out the problems. So anything that is in the marketplace that is open source, inspected by people, by the community, and certified would obviously gain more value, trust, and traction. Right? So that's the way to go about it.
Srikanth, you said some question has come in from WebStream. Yeah.
The next question is, when can we see an integration of MOSIP with some other open source project?
I'll be actually very happy to answer that. There are conversations happening on a daily basis for this. And in fact, a couple of hours before this, also I have had a conversation. And as Puneet was talking about earlier, we want to make sure that integration is pretty straightforward for people to do with MOSIP, right? So we want to validate that and make sure that's the case. So and we are actively working with integrating some of the solutions that are available as open source solutions. And it's also an effort on our part to create common standards so that we will work with multiple open source providers, share code, use the same set of tools and technologies so that we can actually create some de facto standards out there.
In fact, we are in conversation with OpenCRVS community also to see that how we could work with them. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I had a question. See, today we are giving our identity already to so many locations: driving license, passport, Google, Facebook, wallet, Paytm, so many things. Can they become a way to push data into MOSIP? So you don't need to re-authenticate or again go to some, enrollment center and push your data. Like if I go and open a bank account, and if that bank account, is integrated with MOSIP, then what happens is the moment the bank account is open, I've already given my identity data, and the data is already there in the identity system. So that becomes a way for MOSIP to quickly gain popularity in a new country like Philippines or anywhere else, rather than you now opening enrollment centers specifically for this. Why do you need people to go? So that's, maybe an open API or something.
I'll just take that question. There are attempts across the world even using all kinds of transactions leading to identity. There is this whole community called self-sovereign identity is working towards that. saying that if my transactions can provide me with some identity, why do I need some other identity? The problem with that issue is that, while in my talk I had said we are trying to address two important problems. One is the problem of imposter, another is the problem of ghosts. So how do I know that these platforms, which transactional platform, whether it is a wallet like Paytm or a bank account, if we could in some sense certify them as something which is their systems have got the uniqueness which is required for a foundational ID, then obviously we could use that. But if we cannot do that exercise, that there is, for example, at some point in time in India when 2005, a company in Pune did the deduplication of PAN card, and they found 40% of PAN cards were essentially duplicates. So we need to have certain way of creating a trust on that data, verifying that data, and then say that data is unique. Then obviously we could use that. In fact, there are some attempts in that direction. MOSIP has not yet gone there, but at some time it might go. There are some attempts in that direction in state of California. They are trying to experiment with self-sovereign identity, which identity that is virtual, which is based on transactions rather than registration like that. We are watching that space. We are not in that because we are now completely focused on delivering to the countries which are talking to us on the foundational ID the way we have done. But welcome. If you have some solutions on that, we'll be happy to look at that.
Just to add to that, we are not in a hurry. We just want to make sure we get things right.
Yeah. Any other questions here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can't hear. Yeah, now I think.
Finally. So thanks for the great session. So this question is regarding the product architecture. So for instance, when you do such a countrywide implementation of identity, each country would have their different regulatory frameworks, which would enforce certain guidelines how to implement or how to access, for instance. So what has been your experience when you move from country A to B in order to actually capture those guidelines into a product so that it's not difficult to do a lot of variation while delivering an instance of the work?
See, currently we are firming up this platform and providing. Yes, obviously there are countries to country, there are regulatory frameworks and there are regulatory. For example, Philippines Data Protection Act says that we should not capture any kind of photocopies or images of documents which are submitted for verification at the time of enrollment. Shall not be stored. No photocopy of birth certificate or something like that. On the Moroccan side, only the police is empowered to capture biometrics, not this system. We have to work with the police system there to see authentication there, to see whether this thing happens. So each country has their own law and something. What we are doing is MOSIP as a platform would have extracted, say, about 80% of the requirements of across the world. 20% will have to be customized with some SI, and so we are working with SI. Yesterday and day before, we had the SI workshop where 25 companies across the world participated. So idea is each SI would prepare, custom build that for that country. If the SI wants to put that as a kind of a fork into the MOSIP, we will be glad. So tomorrow, if there is another country which says that I don't want biometric, they already have a solution done for some other country. So we'll be gladly to accept it and put it as a kind of a option or modules available to it. That's how. Any questions? Is there any questions from?
There are some repeat questions coming on how can they become part of the project. So maybe you can talk a little bit on the GitHub.
Yeah, so we have an email community as well as we have a Gitter channel, and we have started actually putting out the list of items that we want in a roadmap page in our documentation, and the same are being set out as things to do, which potentially people can pick up from our ticketing system. We have opened up a Jira project for out to the world. And in fact, my colleague Krishnan has marked the first few good to fix, easy to fix bugs, which somebody in the community wants to try and as a starter, right? So we are trying to see how we can take baby steps in trying to get people in. While we have all in some fashion engaged with various people across channels, for MOSIP this is the first time, and every time we do it, it's a new process altogether. So we are still trying to figure out. The best way to do is write to us in public channels, and if you are not paying attention, write to us by email, whatever, right? But just get our attention, and I think with time we will get better in being super responsive. But we are, at this point of time, having released 1.0 out there, trying to step up and amp up our online presence and community support. So the active community support that we are talking about here is something we will also start engaging with the community a lot more. We were busy getting the first version out, and now there will be lots of mailers. We are starting a blog, and the roadmap will be actively looked into. Tasks which are being picked up by various people will be marked as who's picked up, what's coming when. So all these are happening. In fact, in a very closed manner, we have started this exercise. We were originally developing with our team. Now there are 3 different teams contributing already, right? So, and this was just kind of net practice. And then now we are actually opening it out to the larger world. The student community at the IIIT University also has been actively engaged with us in doing bits and pieces. They have done reviews, they have found problems, they have written documents, they have tested some of the code that we have written, they have deployed the software and given us feedback saying, hey, I'm able to deploy, or I made this change. I mean, they've been of great help, right? And this is something that we'll be scaling up. And I think the more contribution that keeps happening and more questions that keep coming in, we will be more motivated to actually take your help.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you all. Now I return back to Arun.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you, Ramesh. Of course, we're always open to questions, feedback, and participation, critique and criticism. The only way the platform will get better is for 1,000 eyes to look at it and make it better. Throughout our 2-year journey, we've had the pleasure of working with some exceptional individuals and exceptional organizations. They've contributed massively to the development of the platform. They've contributed through their thought process, through their inputs, through their networks, and through actual contribution of code itself. We are very thankful, and we want to felicitate every one of you. But we are short of time, and we want to truly recognize some of the exceptional individuals who worked for MOSIP. I want to invite Professor Wendy Hall on stage. We have a few tokens of appreciations to give away. May I request individuals whose name I call to please come up on stage and accept our small token. Thank you. Yeah. Can you please come in? Thank you. Yeah. May I call the following people on stage? Ankit Vaishnav, Ashwin MN, Geeta Vittal Rao Putane, Gurpreet Bagga, Jane Rose Anthony, John David Paneer Selvam, Mandeep Kaur, Mandeep Kumar, sorry, apologies. Mona Bikash Das, Nagarjuna Kuchi, Ramadurai Saravana Pandian, Resham Chugani, Ronak Nayak, Sanjeev Srivastava, Satvik Ramaprasad, Shravan Purigali, Shubham Dharokar, Sarvan Kalla, Urvil Joshi. Uh, I want to read out some more names of some more individuals who could not be here, but their contributions still have been exceptional, and we want them to know that they are here with us in spirit. Let us join in a single applause for all of them when I read out the name. Agnita Banerjee, Amandeep Kanoja, Apurva Chaudhary, Karthik Ramanan, Loganathan Segar, Manoj SP, Piyush Singh, Raghavendran Venkatesan, Soumya Gaudar, Swati Raj, Tabish Khan, Taleeb Alam, Vignesh Vijay Kumar, and Yashwant S. We want you to know that all of you are really special. Thank you. Yes. Okay. May we have a group photograph with all of them? Sanjay and Professor, do you want to join?
him to on.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Professor Wendy Hall for gracing this occasion, and we are sure that, she is part of our international advisory group and having a hawk's eye on what we do and what we don't do. That's important. We are grateful to the PSA, Ms. Edith and her colleagues for coming at very short notice. I remember that only last week she said she would come, and she had flown in very quickly, and for that brilliant presentation on, and also placing the complete trust of 101 million people on us. I think that's very important, and we are thankful to you for that. We are thankful to all of you who have graced here. There are people who have flown in from Bombay, there are companies, there are students, there are others. We are very happy to note that despite being a Friday evening and there are multiple options for entertainment in this venue, around this venue, you chose to be here, and we are grateful to you. We are grateful to Samsung and the organizers for giving us this splendid facility here, as well as the event managers, the audiovisual for live streaming this across the world, and there are equal number of people watching this on their screens. Grateful to all of them. We have some coffee and cookies for all of you at the back. Please enjoy. And thank you. We hope to see you again. We plan to have 6 monthly conferences, meetings like this, where we would like to tell you what we have done in the last 6 months and then ask you what we should do in the next 6 months. Thank you all.